HuntStand Podcast coming back at you from the National Wild Turkey Federation Convention and Sports Show in Nashville. Super big week, lots going on. I'm grateful to be able to get some of this guy's time here to talk turkey, but specifically talk about some of the exciting things that are going on in the research world, which everybody has recognized at this point is very, very important because the stage that we're at with the wild turkey and their status across a lot of the country has in recent times gotten a little bit questionable since they were originally back and restored, and NWTF did all the great work that they did to get turkeys back on the landscape. So I'm here with Patrick Wightman. Patrick, thanks for joining us today on the HuntStand Podcast.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Glad we could make some time to do it during this busy but exciting week.
It is. There's a lot going on here at the convention. Got a lot of other guests lined up, and if you haven't already checked out the first episode, check that one out so you can get kind of a look at the inside of how the NWTF operates.
And your champion, number 9, Hunter.
We're going to jump right into this one, and first thing I want to ask you is, what's your background as a turkey hunter?
Yeah, so I was one of the fortunate ones, I would say, that had a dad that took him out into the woods as soon as I could walk and was tall enough. And my introduction to turkey hunting was through him. Started off just following him around, watching him calling birds because I wasn't, big or old enough to tote a gun yet. And then evolving up to, eventually being able to tote a gun and killing my first bird at 13, and really kind of how I fell in love with the bird and just became infatuated with it and wanted to know as much about the bird as I could, and just wanted to conserve it and share it with people. I'll never forget the first time I heard one gobble, telling all my buddies at school, or had one come in like, man, you got to see this. You won't believe it. Like, it's amazing. And I really just, carried that over into my career, that passion for hunting and sharing times with friends and family in the wood, chasing this amazing bird. Really kind of just drove my career choice to go into research and conservation.
I feel you, man. Yeah, our career paths are different, but also similar in a lot of ways. Hunting, I would say, pretty much saved my life. I think I would have gone down some bad roads if it wouldn't have been for the influence I got from my uncles and having them get me into deer hunting and then eventually turkey hunting. And like you said, as soon as I heard that first gobble, first bird I shot was a jake that I called up myself. I thought I had everything figured out at that point. I was convinced that if I clucked once every 10 minutes that was the ticket, because that was how I shot that first bird.
That was the cadence, huh?
That's how you do it. If you didn't know, that's how you do it. But no, it's our paths are similar. But where did you grow up? In general, and where'd you grow up turkey hunting?
Yeah, so I grew up in Western New York.
I was going to say, you don't have a big Southern boy accent like most of these researchers seem to do in the turkey world.
Been removed from the North for some time, but yeah, that's where I grew up. That's where I cut my teeth, turkey hunting with my dad and my uncle. Finger Lakes region near Corning area, but yeah, Western New York, and then from there, went and got my undergraduate degree at Paul Smith's college. It's in the Adirondacks, and so chased longbeards up there and harvested one up there as well on public land while I was there. And then, from there, when I graduated, I actually went out to South Dakota and worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for about a year, and then saw a job application to apply for a master's position studying wild turkey, and for me that was a dream, and so I threw my name in the hat to study under Dr. Brett Collier at LSU, and was fortunate enough to get the position and was working on a research project in the low country of South Carolina, and that's when I really started, growing up hunting with my dad. It's great to have mentors and people to teach you how to hunt. And, I thought I had it figured out, but then I realized real quick when I got out on my own and started doing it solo by myself. And I had done that in high school and stuff some too, but getting out to different pieces of ground, different pieces of public, I feel like that's where I really learned how to turkey hunt and really enjoy doing that. But yeah, after I left LSU, got a call from Dr. Michael Chamberlain, who's the NWTF Distinguished Professor at UGA right now, asking me if I wanted to do my PhD there. And so when I finished my master's, rolled right into UGA and continued doing turkey research for 4 years and postdoc there for a year. And then most recently, the past 2 years, was working as a research professor there at UGA before I started 3 weeks ago working for the NWTF in this new role.
You know, it's kind of funny from my perspective, looking at the research and biology world. We're kind of in this new frontier per se, and you could correct me if you think my assessment is wrong, but something really cool is happening. And it's like some of these biologists, at least in the turkey world, it's becoming like rock star status. The way that things have popularized with social media and just the ways that this is being communicated now, which I think is so important, because a lot of times all that work is done behind the scenes. The way it's presented is frankly boring to people. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get people engaged, but now I'm seeing like this whole new shift where you mention names like Collier and Chamberlain, and like I haven't met either of those guys in person, but like I know their names. I'm familiar with them. I follow their stuff. I've actually got another interview this week that will be rolling out here on the podcast with Chamberlain and his cohort. Phil Lavretsky.
Oh yeah. The turkey DNA stuff that they got going on.
Exactly.
Very
yes.
interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one too. But I guess what I'm getting at is, I feel like you got into it at a cool time, because like
absolutely,
it's a whole new world, man.
I did. It was very fortunate to have both of those guys as mentors during my career, and that's just kind of how the dominoes fall, so to speak. But very fortunate to have both of those guys to learn from. But yeah, to your point. From the amount of research that has occurred in the last 10 years, it wasn't always like that. When the turkeys, were declining and they started, trapping and transfer and restocking birds, there was a lot of research going on in that time. But then it was successful, right? And so people kind of took a breath, and there was I would say a little slight relaxation in the research world, and there was money being allocated elsewhere. But really in the last 10 years, unfortunately, due to a little bit of a, decline in the Southeast, there was a big push in research, and I just happened to be coming up through the ranks during that time. And so, yeah, I've been fortunate in that regard. And then, yeah, to your point about social media, I think it was really – I can remember right around COVID, I feel like if there was any one good positive thing to COVID, it was people were glued to screens a little bit more. And it was at the same time where Mike was really starting to push out his Turkey Tuesdays and starting to engage with social media people. And that really took off like wildfire. And to your point, and it kind of has stayed steady. And it's exciting as a young researcher, and then now stepping into this role, having science be cool, and in the eye. And I think it is important, because the outreach aspect of it is essential, and we can reach so many more people by doing, podcasts like this. Your listeners can easily digest this information, but not everybody wants to go read a manuscript, right, and thumb through 38 pages of a white document. And so, yeah, it's an important tool now for us, I feel like, as researchers, is using social media and outreach as a whole to reach people about science. And, yeah, luckily Mike Chamberlain's an unbelievable communicator and can really take scientific stuff and boil it down and talk to the general people about it. And so that's, yeah, he's a blessing to have and really paved that way. And hopefully we can all get behind that and continue to do it.
Yeah, making it relatable and engaging with anything like that. Like, that's one of the traps we fall into as hunters. We're so ate up with actually like doing the activity that it's really easy to become complacent about supporting all the things that allow us to continue doing that activity. So that goes with education on research. It goes with R3 with recruitment and retention and reactivation with the whole R3 initiatives. But you touched on something that I want to go a little bit deeper into here, and that is, I just used the word complacency. The wild turkey was restored and, in fact, introduced in parts of the country where it never even existed in the first place. So that was a smashing success story. I think we can all agree that we saw an incredible bubble where populations were going nuts and hunting was maybe at a peak that was a false bubble, even potentially. There might be some, I have some thoughts on that aren't backed by the same level of research that you can lean into, but at least from me looking at it from the outside, it seems like we saw this huge peak, and then we became a little bit complacent. And like NWTF has always been great about focusing on conservation efforts and habitat stuff. But then these alarm bells started sounding, and almost thankfully it was in the Southeast, because the turkey hunting heritage in the Southeast is so much deeper. I almost feel like it would have gone unnoticed if the alarm bells were sounding as much in a different region. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse. But can you explain, at least from your perspective and at least from maybe the data that we have right now, like what happened there? We were real focused on the habitat side, if I understand correctly, and then maybe some of the other things that we should have been paying closer attention to on the biological level or the population level. Maybe we let off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, you could look at it that way. And it was also, to your point, you mentioned, populations kind of hit a peak, and we kind of knew from an ecology, biology standpoint that when you reintroduce species like that, that's oftentimes exactly what happens, right? They establish and then they boom. Well, and then eventually it's going to, level out and start to decline a little bit when you hit carrying capacity, and then kind of find a steady equilibrium. And I think when the alarm bells, they didn't start ringing on that initial decline in certain populations, whether it be in the Southeast or elsewhere, right away, because we're like, well, we expect to see some of this, right? We expect to see a little bit of a decline, and then a level out, and it never really kind of leveled out in certain areas of the Southeast, and it just kept declining. And I think that's why maybe we took our foot off the gas a little bit. It was because of that understanding. But then obviously when it kept, the decline kept occurring, that's kind of when a lot of money started getting pumped into research again, as we talked about. So I think, that's kind of my little explanation of the timeline there, and maybe why we were a little bit behind the ball with the alarm bells ringing.
So rewinding back to your evolution, take us from college into now 3 weeks in with NWTF?
Yeah. It's a whirlwind. But in college it was, spending a lot of time in the woods trapping and tracking turkeys, and that's, for someone who loves the bird and so interested in them, that was a lot of fun time being just spent in the field. And then just watching these birds, tracking these birds, seeing where they live, where they choose to nest, where they choose to brood, looking at those relationships, what makes them successful, what makes them not. So I really kind of got into this lucky stage during my college career when I was, obviously learning academics and, stats and modeling and all those things too. But it was also a time where I spent 8 months each year in the field doing field work, and that was a lot. That was a lot of fun. Then like anything, I think as a wildlife biologist, most of the ones you talk about, you get in the field because you want to do those fun things. You want to be in the field. You want to hold birds. But really what ends up happening is that you end up sitting behind a desk quite a bit and writing papers and crunching numbers. And that's really what keeps the ball rolling from a research science perspective, and keeps things moving along. So it is important. So then, over my career, I kind of got more into that. I'd still get out into the field, but more of the writing papers during my postdoc time, and as a professor at UGA, then bringing in graduate students, trying to mentor them, start other projects. And then, now finding myself here with the NWTF, I'm super excited about this role. Couldn't be any happier or humbled to be here and have this position and the opportunity really to influence the bird at a much larger scale than I could have probably at the university, and help facilitating research kind of across the country. And that's what really drew me to this position. And then also the organization. I've always had a close relationship with the NWTF. In high school, I was part of my local chapter, was on the committee, and then throughout doing research, I'd always come to the convention and present here and everything. And it was really just kind of an opportunity that I couldn't not take. And I'm glad I'm here sitting where I am today.
So give us at least a 300-foot view of like what your role is actually going to entail here now that you're rolling into it with NWTF. And also, like, I know you mentioned earlier before we jumped on, like, you still fully intend to keep your hands dirty in some of the research stuff, but you've also got a lot of managerial aspects to make sure that all the stuff is being managed properly, projects are being doled out properly. So explain that, and also like walk everybody through, what does that process look like? Like, how does a group like the NWTF make decisions about what kind of research is going to be done or who's going to be doing it?
Sure. You want me to? Yeah, we'll start with that, and then we can, don't let me forget, we can go back to the current research that I'm still doing, but we can kind of start more with my role, and then how the NWTF determines where they're going to support research or allocate funds. And so that's a good time to talk about it, because we're here at the convention, and one of my roles will be being a liaison to the tech committee, is what we call the Turkey Technical Committee, which is made up of state agency biologists across the country that are charged with managing this bird in their retrospective states. They meet multiple times throughout the year, and really kind of get an idea of, in their particular regions, some of the bigger challenges that are facing turkeys in their states, and maybe some data or information that they need in order to better manage the resource. And so they come up with, research priorities. And then the NWTF, since 2022, started what we call a request for proposals, where we take those research topics, we boil them down, figure out what's the most important ones, and then we do a request for proposals. So we send that out across the country, nationwide, to researchers at different universities, and say, send us a proposal of how a project that you foresee would help us answer or gain more knowledge about this topic. And then we receive those. Goes back to the technical committee. They vote on it and rank them, and then the NWTF chooses to support said projects moving forward. And so, my role will kind of be a liaison with the tech committee, and then overseeing kind of more of the managerial stuff with the RFP, maybe tweaking it in certain areas where we see fit, and as projects end and new data is collected, and kind of where we have to move forward with focusing on research, just kind of guiding and shepherding that. That'll be one big part of my role, and then the other will be helping establish these endowed chair positions, across the country and at different universities, kind of emulate what we did at what the organization did with Mike Chamberlain at UGA. Creating an endowed professorship where that person is, or that position in perpetuity's primary focus is wild turkey research, and that's really exciting to be a part of, and I'm really looking forward to help that grow. That is invaluable for the research, to know that there will be certain universities across the country in different eco-regions that have different management problems or different questions, that those professors can kind of to focus on the most important ones in that area, and that position will be at that university, hopefully in perpetuity. And then also, really that's where our next conservationists come from too, are these universities, students studying wildlife ecology and research and conservation management. Having someone in the turkey world at those universities, I think is huge for training the next generation of turkey managers as well. Those would be two bigger parts of my job here with the NWTF.
Yeah, that's huge. And like we talked about a couple minutes ago, I think it's always important to remind people that, it's gotten a lot better with the communication side. So a lot of this transparency has happened more naturally. Like you're talking about Mike doing the Turkey Tuesdays on Instagram and Facebook and whatnot. But this doesn't have to be this isn't just behind a closed door. I think classically back in the day, people would hear about all this research that's being done and whatnot, and they had a hard time understanding or seeing the tangible results, or what was actually happening and how it was impacting them, and where the dollars are going and how it's impacting the quality of turkey hunting and all that sort of stuff. Whereas now it's so much more visible. And if you feel like it's not visible, then at this point that's on you, because the information is readily available. Even with a lot of the projects, or I'd say all the projects that NWTF is working on, you can go on the website and you can see what's going on. You can see what's happening in the places that are important to you, whether it be your home state or somewhere else you hunt or somewhere else that you care about. So I really love that side of it as a communicator and a media person. Just to reiterate that, I think that has been a really big deal. And for us, if you just consider yourself a hunter, like, you know that when you give $1 to this organization, like, it's going to be going to the right places, and it's going to be going to areas that are actually going to matter to you, not like just this pie in the sky idea, like real results that actually transfer into people who are trying to enjoy more time and more turkeys in the field. So I love that part of it.
It's spring, and when we're not in the studio, you'd better believe there's only one thing on our minds: chasing longbeards. That's why we're a proud partner of the National Wild Turkey Federation and fully support its mission, the conservation of the wild turkey and the preservation of our hunting heritage. The HuntStand Podcast is also proud to partner with Savage. They offer our favorite tools for taking turkeys with the Renegade Semi-Auto and the 301 Single Shot. We're also excited to be running the new Ridge Runner series of turkey vests from our partners at Avian X. The Ridge Runner and Ridge Runner X are built for long days of running and gunning or sitting and waiting for stubborn gobblers. And remember, as a HuntStand Pro or Ultimate member, you can save major cash on some of the best turkey gear in the new HuntStand gear store. So check it out at HuntStand.com.
Now, aside from just the managerial aspects, which obviously you bring a lot to the table there, there's a ton of juggling that's going on to make sure everything is being executed properly. But you're still going to be doing some cool stuff. You've been working on some cool stuff. I think people would love to hear about some of the GPS data, the accelerometer stuff you've been working on. So
sure, yeah. So yeah, like I said, I'm hopeful that I will be able to keep my hands kind of in the game. I'm staying as an adjunct professor at UGA, which is nice because that just allows me to still sit on committees and stuff of graduate students that are working on projects that I brought in before my departure. And so yeah, I'm not just going to leave them high and dry or leave Mike high and dry. We're going to continue to see those projects forward, and that's exciting to me to be able to have the impact at a larger scale and be part of the RFP and the tech committee and all that, but also still be able to keep a little bit of my hands on the ground doing research. I think that's important. But yeah, so I mean, some of the cool projects we have going on right now. You talked about the GPS units. I feel like we're in another fortunate time to be a turkey researcher in terms of innovation as well. Just the changing technology that we have at our fingertips in order to collect data. I mean, even the advancement of the GPS unit in and of itself, before that, you had students out triangulating with VHF. So, you'd track it and ping it and like, okay, the bird's in that direction. Now let's travel around, take another coordinate. And then you would literally write down, okay, like this is where we think it is. Well, now with, GPS units, and that's all I ever used. I never had to do the old VHF. I mean, I would track them, but never had to triangulate. We ramp these things up, and they'll collect data every 30 minutes to an hour, and exactly where the birds are. And we've gained a lot of what you've seen for Turkey Tuesdays and Mike is like a lot of that information came from having the ability to put GPS units on these birds. But even in the last 5 years, the GPS units themselves have evolved. They've last longer. It used to be just a year you could track birds for typically on that hour-long schedule. Now we're getting close to 2 years worth of data on birds on certain GPS units that we're using. And then also, they've got different add-ons now. And so it's like we call accelerometer, and essentially that's nothing different than like an Apple Watch that you got that a lot of people wear every day that tracks your activity. Essentially, these backpack transmitters that we put on the turkey's back has a little accelerometer built into them, and it kind of tells you, XYZ movements and how turkey. So it adds kind of like this third layer of data that we can collect.
Okay, so that this accelerometer stuff is really sexy and cool to think about and talk about. So I want you to, before we get to that, just real quick, like those VHF, was that a collar they had on them, or what was it, a chip?
No. So it's a backpack, and so it's a little transmitter that's about 3-4 inches long, maybe an inch or two tall, weighs around 100 grams, 90 grams. Got to keep them certain weight so that it doesn't bother the bird. And then we just mount it right on its back. It's got a little antenna that comes off it, and we put paracord, run it through the transmitter, and then run it right over their wings, and then tie it back to the unit. And so it literally looks like two little book bags zigzag loops that ride, and the unit rides on the bird's back.
And that they just go about their normal activities.
Yeah.
It doesn't inhibit movement or anything.
No, and I mean the ones we have now, they used to have longer antennas, and you could kind of see the antennas off their back. The ones we have now, they're even shorter. They're only like an inch or two long antennas, and once they get those on themselves, a lot of the birds will preen them down into their feathers even, and so
Really?
over time it becomes really hard to even see them. Now, if you get them close enough and you look, you can see the bump if you know where you're looking, and you can see the little antenna. But there's a lot of times where it's actually hard to even see on the bird once they preen it down. But yeah, it doesn't phase their movements or anything like that. We put these on males, and they come in strutting and gobbling, and guys will harvest them with the backpack on.
So that'll actually like when you say they preen it, like they're doing that on purpose or what?
Yeah. I mean, well, obviously you could think you put something on a turkey's back, they run off, and then it's kind of like, something's going on back there. And then just like birds do, they'll just peck and preen around the area and kind of bury it into the feathers.
I'm just trying to picture, I'm enthralled with this like physical hardware part of it. I just think it's cool to think about. And I've only seen a few pictures, and I'll try to dig something up we can share here if you're watching the video version of the podcast to check it out. But how is that? Okay, like with the cord, okay, it's a set diameter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What about like when they blow up to strut? How does it not like strangle them?
Yeah, I mean, because that armpit area in the wing where you're tying, like that doesn't actually grow when a bird struts or anything, right? That's all air here. Like it doesn't actually, like they can move their wings, they can adjust it, and that doesn't actually inflame any. So it's not like it's putting tension or pressure on the paracord itself. And we have pretty good retention. Like over time, they will eventually sometimes fall off. Like they'll split and fray. But I mean, we've had birds wear them for 4 or 5 years and come back or get harvested with it on their back. But then sometimes 2 years they'll lose it, or 2-3 years. But typically we get more than 2 years. Sometimes they'll fall off. But like I said, the paracord's pretty good. But yeah, it doesn't seem to bother them much. Obviously, when you're catching juveniles or younger birds, you kind of got to make the loops a little bit bigger, so when they grow and their wings and everything do get bigger, that it's not tight. But yeah, we kind of got that all figured out.
I mean, it's cool that it's improved so much, and it's gone from that old style transmitter to GPS, way more accurate, smaller, all that. But to be honest with you, I'm like you mentioned an Apple Watch. I'm almost surprised that it's not even more advanced. Like maybe it would just be something that's tiny that would be like go on their leg or something. It surprises me that you still have to do that backpack style.
Yeah,
even.
And who knows? We might go away. Yeah, maybe who knows what technology will do? Maybe we'll go away from it. But yeah, I mean, what's so intensive is just the data storage and the battery. Like that's what takes up the biggest portion of it. So the bigger the battery you have, the longer it can run. So it's power limited. That's from a size perspective why they're the size that they are, and not just like a little chip or a tag.
Oh, so okay. So the GPS, the data is being collected on the bird too. It's not. Not being the data isn't being transmitted. Just their location is. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's stored on the unit itself, and then we can actually, when we get close enough, we can pull the data off.
Okay.
So we don't. That way, we don't have to actually get the transmitter back in hand for GPS and accelerometer data. Like we can download that over the air.
It's like through like you have to be close enough, like Bluetooth or something.
It's not Bluetooth; it's UHF, but it's
okay.
just a different. But it's similar, and there are transmitters out there that actually do use Bluetooth. You just have to be a lot closer to the bird. And for our birds, we oftentimes can't get that close to them, so we need to be able to pull that from greater distances. But
some of you might not be as interested in this as me, but I hear about this kind of stuff all the time, and I'm always like, well, like when I'm listening to a podcast or something, I'm like, but wait, how does that thing actually work? So I was interested in it. I'm happy I got to ask you about it, but we'll move on from that. The accelerometer stuff, explain. I've read a little bit on the mortality studies and whatnot, but I think that's something that people would be really geeked out on.
Yeah, sure. So that was kind of one of my first stabs at using the accelerometer data because it's new. There's a lot of different questions you can ask, like when birds are flying up, when they're flying down, if they're walking, they're running, but teasing that out in the way that the data is collected through like machine learning or neural networks or AI it's getting easier, but it's still very difficult. So the first kind of stab as a researcher that I took at using the accelerometer type data was, prior, like I said, we could track these birds, we could get hourly locations, and we would know when they died, but we didn't know exactly at a finite scale exactly when that happened. Because you could imagine, if something comes and kills it and then drags it off, but there's no GPS points within that hour. And it takes a while for them to stack up. Like, you don't know the exact location or the exact time of when that mortality occurred. But with the accelerometers, it collects data at super fine scale all the time. And then when certain activity events hit, like, it starts collecting even more. And so this recent paper that I published that was in the symposium, it was looking at just that. Can we define exactly when mortality events happen within time of day? And why that's kind of cool is it also gave us this new layer of knowing that, turkeys roost at night. So we can actually see, are they being killed while they're in the tree versus on the ground, which is kind of interesting from a predation management standpoint.
So you're gonna get a kick out of this, but I'm putting on a seminar here at the convention in a couple days, and I didn't realize this was from you, but like I'm quoting that what is it? I think is it 42% and 58%?
Yeah.
42% in the tree, 58% on the ground.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly what we found. So 42% of, now that's male mortality.
Yep.
Male mortality occurs 42% occurs while they're on the limb. At night. Now, to kind of paint that in picture and put that into some context, our male mortality in general from natural predation is about anywhere from 12 to 15%. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. It changes year to year depending on site, but on average, it's 12 to 15% is male mortality. And so essentially, what that boils down to is a little less than half of that is occurring when they're in the tree. It's a little different for females also just because of their overall ecology, right? Because they're tied to the ground at night when they're nesting and brooding for certain periods of time. So that changes the game a little bit. We see that there's around 42% of hen mortality occurs when they're nesting and brooding on the ground. 30 to 35% occurs when they're just walking around, and then it was like low 20% occurs in the tree. So,
man, when I saw that stat, I know that it's like you said, 15% of mortality is predator related.
Yep.
But it bummed me out. It bummed me out to know that they're trying to use that security of being on a roost, and they're still getting whacked by mainly owls, right? By great horned owls.
Yeah, I mean, in our study sites in the southeast, that's what we hypothesize. I can't say for certain exactly what it was that took them out of the tree at night. I mean, I guess you could make an argument that a bobcat or a fox could potentially scale up a tree and pull one off the limb, but I'm not sold. I think it definitely is great horned owls in the middle of the night taking them off the limb in our study system. And the old research would also show similar percentages when you're using necropsies are coming up to a site and trying to field guess what happened. Great horned owls are typically head off, breast meat taken away. That's typically when you come up and you see that and you're like, oh yeah, that was a great horned owl. Well, there was estimates of anywhere from 30 to 50% of those being male or on males being owl related, and this kind of just confirms that. We found right around the same percentage, just a different technique and way of doing it.
So this is when I first started reading about this, it's one of those things I like to share with as many people as I come across. Especially, it's kind of like a wow thing to talk about in turkey camps for people who don't necessarily obsess over this kind of stuff as much as I do. I've mentioned that so many times, and it blows people's minds. Like somebody this week I mentioned it to, and they're like, wait, owls do that? So have you guys, do you know of anybody who has like seen it happen in thermal or anything like that with thermal imaging or?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm sure it's out there, but I personally am unaware. But I'm sure it's got to be out there.
So do you think when you guys visualize it, do you think that they're literally like dive bombing them and knocking them out of the tree and then getting them once they're on the ground, they take them out?
Yeah, take the head and then pluck out the breast meat.
That's just, man, that's so wild to think about.
It's tough for a turkey. Like I said, with males, obviously, it's still a small percentage. Doesn't happen that often, but of male mortality that it does, it is. And yeah, it stinks, because that's supposed to be safe for them, right? That's why they get up in a tree. That's why they don't spend the night on the ground. But yeah, it's tough being a turkey.
It also, once again, proves a resiliency, though, because, I mean, I think about, it's easy to think about things in human terms, but you think about especially like a traditional roost, you would think that once a predator like that keyed in on somewhere where they know there's going to be a group of turkeys every night, you think that they would pick every last one of them off. They would stay there and they would kill all of them until they had their fill, and then they'd move on. But I only know of one instance where that may have happened, and the landowner actually more so suspected that it was a mountain lion on the property in western Nebraska, because they had a traditional roost on there forever, as long as they knew. I was fortunate to hunt it a couple times, and then one of the years I wanted to go back to hunt, they're like, the birds are gone. And I'm like, you're probably just not seeing them, And this lion had been around, and they had a bunch of trail camera images of it and whatnot. And sure enough, I went back there to hunt, and there wasn't a bird. There was not a bird on the property. It went from, having 80 to 100 that came back to this roost every single day all year to 0 on the property.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, we see some clustering with the owl predation. Now we don't have a ton of information on exact locations, just because, like I said, it is a smaller percentage of the number of birds that actually do get killed. And we've only been collecting this data for the last 2 or 3 years, but we do see some anecdotal clustering of, there's just certain areas where there seems to be more owl predation than others. But also, it's those are also communal roosts, and where turkeys like to roost a lot, and so turkeys are dying where turkeys live. It's kind of one of those things. It gets convoluted, but
see, that's where it's really important to have you guys, because you take all the pieces and put together the full picture.
Try to anyways, right?
Well, you guys do a pretty good job of it. And someone who's a little bit more simple-minded like me, just a regular old hunter, we always want to draw these simple conclusions and A plus B equals C. And usually when it relates to biology and conservation, in any regard, it's far more complicated, and that's a challenge that you guys face.
Yeah,
and that's why the research is so important.
Yeah, just a lot of nuances. That's what I like to tell people, right? There's a lot of nuances that go into it, and then we talk about the social media and the outreach and the communication side of it, and it's hard to boil it down and capture all of those nuances, but also make it digestible. But yeah, we do our best.
So we'll leave people with this. What other stuff is cooking right now that you can talk about that excites you and that might excite turkey hunters and just turkey enthusiasts with some of the research that's going on, or at least that's you guys are planning to work on?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've got a project going on right now that was funded partially by the NWTF. When I was at UGA, kind of we'll go the technology on the transmitter route again, but I actually have audio loggers that are going out on the backs of these GPSs, and then on the back of the birds, and so I can record gobbling activity for the first hour each morning on an individual bird for about, we're hoping 80 days. This is our second season, but it's still kind of a pilot, where we're getting these units out. Anytime you put new technology on a bird's back, there's going to be problems, and we ran into problems in the first year. But I think we're actively trapping birds right now and putting these out in South Carolina and Georgia, and I'm pretty hopeful that it's going to work this year, and it will allow us to to answer some pretty interesting questions about detection probability, individual voice recognition, potentially. I don't know if it'll get there. It's probably a 50-50 shot of being able to identify or train a model to identify individual turkeys. If I know exactly, like, hey, this gobble came from this bird, can we train a model to then tease that out of our stationary recorders that are in trees that we've been recording for years? And so all of those things will kind of piece together a puzzle that maybe will help us get more accurate abundance estimates for these birds, which from a research perspective, I think is a challenge that we face. Actually, just knowing how many turkeys are out there, it's hard to manage something when you don't know how many you have. And so if we can use new technology to advance our knowledge on the number of birds out there, I think that's important. And it also is important for us to measure the success of management, right? And so if we make a management, whether it's a regulation or a habitat management recommendation, and we implement that, we want to be able to track changes in abundance or recruitment. And so I think that research is exciting to me because it's new, and I think it could shed some light on that.
Yeah, that's a cool one. And when you start to dig in even just lightly into some of this stuff, not just for turkeys but also for some big game species, it's kind of alarming where the gaps are in like population information state to state. I mean, you would think that everybody would be on a similar program at this point, but it seems like there's still a bit of an uphill battle there even to just get some reliable numbers.
And I mean, there's people behind the scenes working on that, especially the tech committee. We talked about that earlier, but it's hard, but we're trying to get there.
Because I mean, not even every state shares harvest information, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe different levels, but no, I don't think they all do, no.
Yeah. So, Patrick Wightman, appreciate you being here on the HuntStand Podcast.
Yes.
There's so much more we could talk about, and this won't be the last one we have with guys like you who are really doing the groundwork that matters to conservation of the wild turkey, preservation of our hunting heritage, all the things we care about, all the reasons we love the NWTF. We've got a lot more cool content that's going to be coming at you here from the convention. So tune in every week as we're doing this turkey special here on the podcast. Leave a rating, drop a review, drop us a comment. If you have any questions, hit us with them. This is the HuntStand Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.